Thank you, Kim. I'm going to become the presenter here, and we'll get started right away. So one thing I want to talk about before I get started, I know Kim's talked about it, but let me talk about it a little bit more because it's really important for us, and we think you're going to get a lot of value to this Let's Learn Live Dynamics NAV Virtual Summit. We're going to have some really good speakers teed up for this event. Our keynote speaker is Microsoft's General Manager for Dynamics NAV and Dynamics 365, a gentleman named Marko Perisic. If you've been to any of the partner or customer events or to Convergence in past years, you have very likely sat through a keynote that he's delivered. So here's somebody who delivers keynotes for large national and international audiences, and he's agreed to make some time for InterDyn BMI's own customer and prospect base. So we strongly encourage you to attend this. You'll get to learn about what's coming down the pipeline with the new versions of Dynamics NAV and what Microsoft foresees for NAV's future and how your investment's going to be protected. Then we're also going to show a what's new in NAV 2017. For those of you who don't know, Microsoft releases a new version of NAV every year in October, right around this time. So on October 24th, just a little short of a week, next Monday that is, we're going to have the new version of NAV out, NAV 2017. And Tom Taylor, another gentleman from Microsoft who's a partner technology strategist, has also graciously accepted our invitation to present to our InterDyn BMI customers. So if you're looking to see what's new, what's been changed about NAV 17, and I can give you a sneak preview, there's some excellent features, especially as it relates to how Outlook and NAV will play well together. You'll see how you can get a customer email or a vendor email in Outlook, and right from the body of your email, you'll be able to create an invoice, look at open payables or receivables without ever leaving Outlook. So that and a whole lot more is coming down the pipeline. So I encourage you to attend this. For folks who are in the manufacturing vertical, you will enjoy the Lunch and Learn by our sister company, 2Increase, and we'll talk about the industrial equipment manufacturing functionality that Dynamics NAV has and how we can help your organization get the most out of that functionality. And then we'll have 2 training sessions, 1 hour long NAV technical training sessions. So if you sit through these, you're going to be able to apply the learnings from these sessions directly into your work environment. We're choosing topics, and these should be determined by the end of this week. We're choosing topics that are quick and easy to learn, and we think you're going to see some immediate gains in efficiency. So I strongly, again, encourage you to attend. We will send you, as a follow-up to this event, a registration link. It takes nothing but a quick minute to register. You click on it and you just have to put in your username and your, I think, a couple of fields of information. So really just here, don't register as HN, sorry, of course, but your name, your last name, your email address, and you'll get an invitation to attend. So once again, do take the time to do that. So with that, I'm going to jump to the topic at hand. My presentation today is about cash flow forecasting and budgeting with Dynamics NAV. I will be using NAV 2016. And I think what I would say is that most of the things that I talk about today will apply to your versions of NAV as well. Cash flow forecasting specifically applies only to NAV 2013 and newer, but budgeting, most of these concepts will apply to other versions. So unlike a lot of other sessions that I do, this is not going to be a PowerPoint-heavy slide deck. For those of you who didn't see a little background about myself, I've been working with NAV for about 10 years as a consultant and implementer and developer. More recently, I've been taken on the role of product manager since about 2012, and I help prospective clients evaluate Dynamics NAV against a host of other products. And then I also focus on developing some intellectual property and productizing that to take to the market. But with that said, let's jump to our first topic. I do have a few slides on cash flow forecasting, but beyond that, when it comes to budgeting, it's going to be entirely show and tell. With a session like this, I normally have about 30 to 40 minutes worth of content. I like to leave some time on the other side for questions. A lot of that tend to come up, so I hope you won't disappoint today. And again, available from NAV 2013 onwards. I don't know if you're using this at all and looking to learn more about it, or if you're not using it and you're simply curious and have come here to satisfy your curiosity about what this can do for you. But I thought it would be a good idea to just kind of talk a little bit about budgeting versus cash flow forecasting. So if you've used account schedules in Dynamics NAV, you've got your statement of cash flows. If you're using budgets, you're probably also using it for some extent to forecast or to be able to run some numbers that you've created, an external forecast, and be able to compare that against actual performance. So it's a great corporate performance management tool, budgeting in general. But with Dynamics NAV 2013, Microsoft decided to delve a little bit into the area of future-oriented planning. So we never had a true future-oriented planning instrument. So if you were looking to objectively observe and track the solvency of your company in future periods, budgeting alone would not help. Now it's really nice, and I hate to do a webinar a week before new functionality is introduced, but everything I show you around cash flow forecasting today is going to hold in the next version of NAV, plus Microsoft's adding machine learning enabled forecasting through a service called Cortana Intelligence Suite. So you'll be able to benefit from artificial intelligence in predicting your future cash solvency. So what we're doing here with the NAV cash flow forecast and forecasting in general is we're taking our currency assets from previous periods and we're compiling all the periodic information, which is going to be our operational revenues and expenses, and then calculate whether we have a surplus or a deficit in cash. This allows you to plan ahead for future capital projects that you may want to undertake, probably do some credit reduction if you've got a lot of cash surplus, or even decide or predict when you will inevitably have to borrow some money to keep your business healthy. So these types of tools this tool in general I think will be very helpful. So how can NAV's cash flow forecast help you then? So what's nice is, in addition to the ability to calculate your cash forecast, NAV's also got a really nice dashboard chart that can sit right on your home screen and be a constant reminder of your performance, and you'll be able to drill down on and get additional information. There are also some very nice reports I think that you would like with the cash flow forecasting module. I might cover one or two, but I'll show you a little bit around it. My focus will be more around constructing cash flow forecasts and drilling down. I personally am not a big fan of printed out reports, but I know a lot of people are. To me, a report essentially is the ability to drill down, capture, and observe outputs from a certain type of a functional area. That does not necessarily have to be on a static piece of paper. It's just as well if it's interactive, if I can look at statistical views, drill down, etc. I personally find, and I'm a strong advocate of this, I think this is a much better way of getting your reports if it's interactive on your screen, because you can drill down and see so much more that you can miss on a piece of paper. Now, we find that in Dynamics NAV cash flow forecasting, we have the ability to capture values from a lot of different functional areas. Now, as you can imagine, we're going to be able to take values from our general ledger, from our sales modules, our open sales order, so open purchase orders, our service and fixed assets modules. We can capture information from budgets that we identify. Any open payables and receivables that we have, we'd be able to use those as well in our cash flow forecast. And then above and beyond this, we would be able to take manual projections of revenue and expense and enter those into the system. Excuse me, pardon my cough, it's bothering me a little bit today. And we'd be able to help that in the projection of future cash position. If I wanted to give you a graphical overview, it would look something like this. So we would first do a little bit of a setup of our cash flow forecast, and then define all the sources that we want to consider for our cash flow forecast, and all of those things can be then used towards the creation of the forecast itself. Now, what Microsoft has done is recognizing how much data usually exists. It would be very, very slow if you were to type all of that in. So much like a payments module in Dynamics NAV, if you've used the payable side, you know how there is the suggest vendor payments, which goes and looks through all the different areas of NAV and all the different payables, and comes back with, this is what we think you're going to need to pay. And these are all the vendors that need to be paid. So similar concept is used in the cash flow area, that there is a suggest cash flow forecast worksheet. We can take information from all the different sources we've defined, and then that puts together and creates my my forecast entries. And that is what we actually visualize. So towards the end, like I said, I'm going to take questions. If you want to type in your questions as they come up, you're welcome to type them in. We'll definitely make sure that we're not missing them, and we'll address them before the session's over. Now, in the unlikely event that there are a lot of questions and I can't answer them, I'll be happy to take them offline, or I can stay a little bit longer at the end of this call as well. So with that, let's go into demonstration. I'm going to run this demonstration using the Accounting Manager Role Center in Dynamics NAV. Once again, I'm using Dynamics NAV 2016. Now notice I've already got a cash flow forecasting area here. You'll find that certain profiles like Accounting Manager, President, etc. will have this functionality built in. Now if you are running a different profile, and there are about 25, 26 of those out of the box, plus more that we may have created for you or you may have created for yourself. You can always look at all the profiles available to you, and there's a couple ways to figure out how you ended up with the profile that you have. So if you were to look at the profiles list, you'll find one that's typically marked as the default profile, excuse me, or the default role center. So anybody who's a new user who hasn't been assigned a specific profile will automatically inherit this. Plus, Dynamics NAV has an area called user personalization. This is where your admin or yourself, you yourself can go in and identify what profile is assigned to your account. So I'm logged in as Alicia Thomber, and I can see Alicia has a profile ID of Accounting Manager with this language ID, and by default logs into this company. Now for anybody who's worried that, boy, what if my users can go here and change their profile and then they'll be able to see everything? Fear not, because a profile or role center, in this particular conversation, I'll use them interchangeably, but there is a small contextual difference. The profile itself is just what you experience in terms of components and layouts and fields on certain screens. But if you actually have security set up to where everybody's not a super user, you're going to find that even if somebody is logged in as a president or logged in as an accounting manager, they will not be able to drill down and see anything relating to payables, receivables, or the general ledger. So just having a certain profile assigned to you doesn't automatically imply that that person is going to be able to see things that they're not able to. You make sure that you've got the right security setups, and completely going on a tangent here for a quick 30-second piece. Dynamics NAV has a lot of improvements on the security side in NAV 2016 to where I can quickly trace which screens I'm going on and then record security permissions report around those. So what I mean is, as an admin, I could come in, I could click on chart of accounts, vendors, excuse me, a couple of fields, etc., and then NAV will actually record those as things that I intend to have this person use in their security permissions. And I could assign those to people. It is not perfect, but it is definitely a lot better than I think what some of you who have been using NAV from 2013 onwards have experienced. So coming back to our topic at hand, I'm logged in as the accounting manager. If you do not see the cash flow forecast by default, go ahead to the menu, your main menu here, and say customize this page. And you can make sure that the cash flow module is, if it's not here, will probably be somewhere here. You can just go ahead and select add, place it where you'd like to. If there are too many things on board on this section, just go ahead and remove the ones that are not important to you. So now we'll have a lot of space for a cash flow forecasting module. So at a glance, as I'm looking at my cash flow forecasting module, I have the ability to control what type of information or how much detail it's showing. So I can tell the system that I'd like to look at everything at a day, week, month, quarter, or year level. So I typically like to view this at a month, so I'm going to do that. A little less information, so easier to track. Now, because this is a demonstration environment, I've actually got some very insignificant entries in the year 2017, January, February, and December. I happen to be in the year 2018 in my demonstration environment. So just because these entries exist, now it's kind of almost wasting all the space. And if you look at this, the budget values are actually 0, but I have periods that have been budgeted against. I can also control how much data I want to see. So I could say either use the first entry date, or I can say show me starting this working date. So it's going to now clean up and show me a little more information. If you've noticed in Dynamics NAV, if you've worked with charts and graphs before, there are different types of charts in Dynamics NAV. There's some that you can drill down on, and then there are others that you can't. So I'll kind of bring up a couple of the other ones as well, and you'll see how these all vary and what your expectations can be. So loading these two other charts, And again, I'm going to, as I add components, sometimes it resizes things a certain way, but once I've resized it, if I leave it as it is, it won't change that layout for me. So my cash flow forecast charts are, are fully interactive. So I can hover over something, see a value, and then I click on it, and it'll actually take me to the entries that resulted in this calculation. So these are called cash flow forecast entries. It's not actually looking at my general ledger entries, but it absorbed this information from the general ledger entries into my cash flow forecast entries area. So that gives you a little bit of a sense of what's happening here. Finance performance charts, which you may also have seen and maybe used, are built around account schedules in Dynamics NAV. These are also interactive and fully clickable. So I can hover over something here and I can see revenue, etc., or expense, or track my expenses before interest, or earnings before interest, excuse me. And as I click on something, it will also take me down to my account schedule. So again, something I can click down on. There's a third category of charts in Dynamics NAV, and these are called generic charts. So that blank chart area I have, these are where you make charts from list views. I'm not going to make one, but just earlier today when I was doing another presentation for Dynamics NAV, I'd created a couple, and so I'd actually used a couple, created one. So I'm going to pick one out. This was a chart that was created from a list of vendors that I had in Dynamics NAV. All I'd done was filtered down on that vendors list and said, show me vendors by balance due and by the location that I purchased into or received goods into. So this was a type of chart that was created on the fly. These are partially interactive, and I can hover over them and get a value, but when I click, nothing happens. So as you look through, make sure that you're specifically loading the finance performance chart and, the cash flow chart, and not one of the other ones. So that information in hand, let's go ahead and work a little bit on the cash flow areas. So a couple ways you can go about this. I'm going to start a little bit with setups. We're going to not be able, I won't say that you're going to be a fully trained cash flow forecasting expert by the end of this, but I'll give you enough to where you can be dangerous. Now, what's nice about the cash flow module, just like the budgeting module, is if you make a mistake, you're not actually hurting the general ledger. You can't, the worst that will happen is you'll have some really bad metrics to measure against. However, you're not going to affect the general ledger, you're not going to affect your receivables, your payables, or customer sales orders, so it's not going to be detrimental to your business. Like I said, the worst thing that you can happen is you look at everything and go like, oh boy, this just doesn't make sense, I should have more cash or less cash, maybe I am, or I'm not considering the things I need to be doing. So let's go to our setups. Now most people like to go from departments, etc. I am more of a search person, so I'm just going to go ahead and type in my cash flow. And as I go through here, I can find my cash flow setup. Now here, what I want to do is be able to map out my account numbers on the cash flow chart of accounts. So if you've ever seen a cash flow chart of accounts, great. If not, let's also go to that. Chart of cash flow accounts is the more appropriate title for it. Now this is an example. You may have fewer or more buckets. What happens here is you've got different types of accounts. You've got one for receivables, open sales orders. You may have other categories that you put manual projections into, etc. And these are marked with type entry. So these are being collected from existing sources and then being entered either manually or from the suggest cash flow worksheet. There are also going to be certain ones that are not entry related that might actually be coming from a budget. So you might actually, if I were to look at one of these accounts, I could say source type, GL budget as an example, and then I can actually select the GL account number or the budget and then select the appropriate budget. I could also say this is a, excuse me, let me expand this so I can read this better. Yep. I can also state that this is an entry, or if I want to use totaling, then I could say heading, total, begin total, end total, much like I do in my chart of accounts. So you're able to define this, and if it's totaling, then you want to make sure you're getting the right formula in. Again, you see some examples of that here. So what we do here is in the cash flow setup, we identify what NAV will do with all the receivables, payables, sales, service, purchases, fixed assets, etc., that it gathers from the different functional areas. Which cash flow chart of account number will it put that into? These are all non-general ledger accounts. It's just a quick reference to how we're going to be able to categorize things. So by doing this and by setting a numbering series, I can then also control the entries that are created. Now Dynamics NAV has a full list of accounts that it can work with. Just like you do with the chart of accounts, if you're using categories, if you're using, begin and end totals, I always recommend you say indent chart of cash flow accounts, and this is going to create these nice hierarchies for you. If you'd like to see what the entries are, again, this part also works like Dynamics NAV's general ledger and chart of accounts. I can click on it, it'll actually show me all these different entries. Now, I can see, for example, here, this is coming from a customer invoice, and I can look at show, and this will now take me out of my cash flow forecast entries and take me to the related general ledger or subledger entry. So here, this is now the customer ledger entry. I can see the actual line. This allows me to see the actual receivable if I wanted to. The actual invoice that I created, all the way down to what part I sold, when I sold it, the address I shipped it to, and all that good fun stuff. And if I wanted to, I can also drill down to the general ledger entries. Again, works very much like everything else you do in the customer ledger entry. So if I were to click on navigate, I could see there are two journal GL entries, and I could click on that and I could see what the debit and the credit transaction was when we created that sale. So all that detail that you're used to seeing in Dynamics NAV will be visible here as well. So what you've probably noticed here is these entries are all generated from and nicely integrated with the general ledger that we have today. So this, while it's separate, exists as a separate module in NAV, it does live off of and relies on data that we put into the general ledger. Let's exit this and let's come back into my cash flow chart of accounts. Now, if you want to create a new account, it's quite simple. You just click on New, and you'd be able to fill in the details. So it's not a worksheet type of screen where you might be used to in journal entries. You just go ahead and type in that details in this area. Now, one area here that's nice to notice is the building occupancy. I like to use this as a good example because this actually ties to a GL budget. So I referenced it before, but in this particular case, my building occupancy costs are tied to GL budget and utilizing my budgets for the account 65-100 to 65-300. Now, if I'm curious of what those are, I could always just say, show me 65-100. My cleaning, let's actually, why don't we put a range here, 65-300. So my cleaning, electricity, and heating, and repairs and maintenance. So we're going to use budgets for these three accounts. So that's how simple it is for me to take one or more accounts and then tie this integration together. So you'll find that these types of entries are also shown in my other expenses. So you see some very nice use of filters and ranges and pipe, which allows me to say 61-100 to 61-300 and 61-350. So a lot of the same types of things that you're used to, you can use. And now notice here cash flow funds. That goes into a source type of liquid funds where we're simply taking the balance from our general ledger for these accounts. So this is probably my sum of all of my general ledger receivable accounts. So 11200 ... 11600. Oh, those are, sorry, not my receivables. I spoke out of turn here. My liquid assets, of course, as the name implies. So with that type of information, let's actually move forward a little bit. We've now seen the setup. Let's go back into this PowerPoint slide that I had before, and where I said we're going to take our setups detail, we're going to take our sources, and we're going to use them in a suggest cash flow forecast worksheet. So to that end, let's go and do it. Back here in NAV, I'm going to go to an area called cash flow forecasts. And this is where I can manage and maintain my forecasts. Now when you're looking at your list, just like budgets, you can have multiple cash flow forecasts. You're not limited to just one. Different individuals can create multiple ones, or you can create multiple cash flow forecasts as well. But only one of those can actually be used as a chart on your home screen. So you want to define, I guess, which one is the one that you rely on. That doesn't mean that you can't change it in the future, but the one that you decide to show on your dashboard should be clearly identified as show in chart and roll center. Now I'm going to go ahead and use this, and then we're going to just recreate some of the detail around here. So you can go and reassess or recalculate your cash flow forecast as well. So what I'd be able to do is come here on this screen, and I first identify what's called my description 2 if I like, and then what all I'm going to consider. So let's talk about these a little bit. We can set up our discounts. So what I want you to consider around discounts is if you provide payment terms in Dynamics NAV, and those payment terms have discount codes, then you would be able to use those easily. So let's say you have a discount code of, or a payment term of net 30, but if somebody pays in 15 days, you give them a 2% discount. Pretty standard, easy to set up in Dynamics NAV's payment terms. You want to make sure that those are also considered. So when the cash flow forecast is looking into future periods, it can also leverage the discounts you would get from early payment or that you provide to your customers for early payment. If you have payment discount tolerant dates and tolerance amounts, you can also consider those. This is where we are basically selecting show in roll center. These are fields that are basically showing up here in the column view once you've set them up. We want to tell the system what budgets we're going to consider, so budget from and budget to. If you're wondering where the budget itself is referenced, we'll get to that in a second. And then if we have manual payments, then we want to consider them from this range to this range. I'll talk about them briefly as well here. But sometimes these can be a little bit longer to talk about. I'll see if I can touch on them ever so briefly. For the things that I've suggested, it's going to show me some statistics as well over here that I can drill down into. But what I want to do is take all of this and I want to go through and refresh this. So once I come to this cash flow worksheet screen, here I can either start typing out all my entries, and boy, I hope we don't have to do that ever, or I can actually just say suggest worksheet lines. This is where I determine exactly which budget I use and all the details. So I'm going to say yes, stick with this. Now the name obviously is kind of bad. It's Cash Flow Forecast 2008. I don't like that. Maybe why don't we just change this name a little bit? I'm going to say 2018. I think it was just a typo as we're creating this. So now we go back in here. We're just going to say suggest worksheet lines. We're going to select our cash flow. And then we're going to say what type of sources to include. And as we select these, it will know which cash flow forecast account to put them into. So my liquid funds, yes. Receivables, yes. Consider my sales orders, yes. Service orders, yes. Maybe I'm not using fixed assets in NAV, so I won't select that. Consider my manual revenues, payables, purchase orders, manual expenses. And then, yes, select my budget as well, which is my 2018 budget. And then if I want to group these by document type, so this is a nice way because it's going to take all my entries and group them nicely by document type on my screen, so I can look at them and assess them closely if I want to for analysis purposes. Otherwise, they'll probably be arranged by date. So I hit OK, and NAV comes up with all of these details. Now, a quick note that if I were to go back into my home screen, unless Microsoft has fixed this, yeah. Look at this. Once you have now reset this or recalculated a cash flow worksheet, temporarily Microsoft will get rid of the chart itself here. So you're not going to see anything because the last run that you had actually no longer applies. You're about to refresh this. So it's basically going to come here and say, now what do I do? You can say, all right, go ahead. We're going to look at all of this. If we have any changes to make, we will. Most often I'd recommend there is no need for changes to be made. All my manual expenses and revenue details are also being considered, as you see over here. So personnel costs are being repeated every month, 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 4, 1, 5, 1, etc. Right? And when I'm ready, I can go ahead and I can register this. So registering is the equivalent of finalizing this cash flow forecast. I'll hit OK. OK. Now this cash flow forecast has been registered, which means it's ready for us to use. I'll give it a quick second. Or maybe 5. It's usually pretty quick to register, but probably it's got a little bit of stage fright here. So I come back over here, I can say refresh. Now I've got my cash flow forecast here, starting with the starting date that I presented. Now here again I have all those entries that I showed you before. The one thing that's conspicuously missing is, in all of this, I'm actually not seeing my the line that shows my cash. So if I want to, I could say show change in cash, which is what we're seeing, or show just the accumulated cash. Or I think I like to see both. So I could say show combined, and then it will show me my accumulated cash and my change in cash by period. If I also want to, I can define the group by. So I can say by account number. So this is going to take it by cash flow account number that is from the chart of accounts. If you like to refer to it by that, you can say by source type, which I think is usually the easiest way to reconcile to kind of to understand this. Or you can also say show me by positives and negatives. So just take all my positives, take all my negatives for a period so I can see in larger blocks, easier comprehension exactly what's going on. So we do this, and this is how we manage and we observe our cash flow forecasts. Now back over here in my cash flow forecasting area, I am going to exit this. Oh, I'm sorry, I meant to show you a report here. Maybe I can go back a couple of screens. Statistics. So I talked about before that I like to look at my information in a on-screen report so I can drill down. This is the equivalent of a report in that it provides me all the detail nicely positioned, and if I want to, I can interact with it. So I see that I have about $1 million in receivables, and if I want more details, I click on it, it lets me drill down. So instead of a chart presentation, I can look at it this way. Then there is also the cash flow date list. Let me see about running this particular report. So I'll say run it for 12 intervals. My interval length will be 1M, so that's 1 month. And I can print this to PDF or schedule this run later, or I'm just going to go ahead and preview this. And this might take just a little bit depending on how much data has been posted to these. So it shows me period by period what's actually happening within each of these buckets. So fixed assets disposal and fixed assets budget aren't considered at all here because we said ignore them. We're not considering them when we built this up. And that's how we can get a quick report around it. Your manual revenues and your manual expenses, you can enter them over here. So if you have, you create your, think of it as the equivalence of a journal. So what I'm doing here is a recurring journal rather. So I set up here things like personnel costs, and I've defined this as with a code number, the cash flow account that it's going to impact, the start and the end, the recurring frequency, so 1 month here, and the amount that's going to recur. So we'll have $130,000 recur as an expense on around personnel costs every month, running costs of $75,000, and finance costs of $15,000. And on the revenue side, if I wanted to, I'd be able to track things like rentals, financial assets, and private investments. So even though Dynamics NAV doesn't actually have a rentals management module, here let's assume that this particular company, Cronus USA, has some external rental functionality or some third-party rental functionality, but they want to make sure that they're forecasting adequately for this rental-based revenue every month, financial assets, and private investments that they have. So you set these up. It's very simple. If you want to add another line, you just come here and say what the code is, the account number that it's going to flow to, put a description, start, end, recurring frequency, and an amount. And that's really all you need to do. So what I find is by the time I'm done showing some of this functionality, folks go, wow, this is actually quite easy. Is there more to it? Certainly. We can spend a lot of time training on the appropriate construction of a chart of accounts for cash flow, what type of categories you want to build in, what you want to consider within the cash flow itself. But going from a blank screen that you might have today to where it's something you at least have a good starting and working cash flow forecast, I think it's quite simple. As you see, we accomplished that in about barely 30 minutes or less. What I'd like to do then is go on the next topic, and I see there's a hand raised. I'll get to questions at the end, so don't lose faith. I'm going to then jump into my PowerPoint slide ever so slowly, and we're going to talk about budgeting. So budgeting in Dynamics NAV has been available for a long time. It's very simple functionality. It's simple because you are able to do it within NAV. You're able to do it within Excel. There's really not a lot of complexity to it. but that also means it's not necessarily as powerful as some third-party tools out in the market. InterDyn BMI partners strategically with Solver, which is a really good business intelligence, budgeting, and corporate performance management tool, and can help you build your budgets in Excel and help you build your budgets that you can publish and share with other folks within your organization. And it's certainly more powerful in many ways around the use of dimensions and how you can do much more. Also, there's some tools like Jet Express, which you get with your purchase of Dynamics NAV, and you can also use some budgeting functionality there. But that functionality is really just taking what NAV does and putting it in Excel. It's really not much more complex than that. So I'm going to show you today just core NAV budgeting functionality. We'll not delve into any ISV products. We're going to show you exactly what you get out of the box with NAV. So with that, let's go into demonstration and go right back to our Accounting Manager Role Center. I'm going to go into my General Ledger Budgets area. Now, you might just find it's references budgets, which is basically the same thing. Any budget that I create can use up to 4 unique dimensions. So here I've got a couple of dimensions that we're utilizing in our 2014 or 2018 budget, excuse me, which is the area and the sales campaign code. My 2017 budget does not utilize any codes at all. Let's go ahead and first track an existing budget, and then time permitting we'll also create a new one. So we'll say edit budget here, which is very different from edit list. So we've got 2 edits. Edit list will just allow me to change the name of the budget or the description or the dimensions assigned to it. Or I can block it if I no longer intend to use this budget in reports. The edit budget button actually opens up the full matrix. Now, if I were interested in working with the budget with certain predefined filters, I can set those ahead of time. Right now I'm viewing my entire general ledger, or perhaps some selected accounts. I can't remember when this was created, if it took everything or just a select number of accounts. I'm seeing this at the day level. Now if I want to observe my budget or track my budgets by month, which is what a lot of companies do, month or quarter, etc., I'd probably do that here. This becomes the lowest level at which I'm going to be entering budgeted entries. Now if I had some data already here, it would consolidate this up to a month level. So I'll give you some examples here. First, let's make sure that we've got some filters. So I'm going to say that I'm doing this with some filters here. Department and project in my environment, by the way, forgot to mention this. Department and project are my global dimension 1 and my global dimension 2 in my system. For anybody who doesn't know about the dimensions functionality in NAV, traditionally you had up to 8 dimensions, and now you can use more. And 2 of those have always carried a greater significance from the financials module. They are known as global dimensions. They appear on all of the data inquiry as well as the data entry screens, and they are utilized very easily in all sorts of reports. And when we set up things like budgets, we can identify 4 budgets in addition to the 2 global. So here my department and project are always going to show plus budget dimension 1, budget dimension 2, 3, and 4. So let's say I want to do this for my sales department. Or maybe let's say let's just say administration expense. Actually, I think this is a better one. So I'm going to do this, and I'll refresh my screen. Then maybe I just want to look at my accounts in this particular range, so I don't want to have to browse through them. I'll say 50,000 onwards. Okay. So now it's going to kind of bring them up. As I scroll down, I'm going to say maybe my cost of retail. Let's come down to my 60,000. I might have some advertising expenses. Now, how about that? So let's assume that in the month of January, I expect to have $1,500 in advertising expenses. I type that in. It goes ahead and says my total budgeted amount is $1,500. I also think in the month of February we're going to have a little market advertising expense, but it'll be a little bit lower. So I say 1,000. Now, once I do these, what the system essentially creates, if I were to drill down in here, is a one-line budget entry. So this doesn't post to the general ledger, but this goes in a table called general ledger budget entries. So I can see, because I'm looking at this from a month at the beginning of the month in January, in this budget we assume for this account a budgeted amount of $1,500. All right, and marked for code department administration. Now if I wanted to zoom out of this a little bit and look at the quarter, now I can see that it rolls up my month into quarter, I still have the same budgeted amount of $2,500, but my display now goes up to the quarter level. And if I were to drill down from here for Q1 2018, I could see I have two entries, one entry for 1,500 and one for 1,000. Now once I've made a decision to enter these at the month level, the week and the day ones, they become very difficult to track and make meaning of, because what you're going to essentially see is it's going to say that week 1 through week 4 are going to have, or sorry, week 1 is going to have the 1,500 and week 5 is going to have 1,000 because the first day of the first week, because the date that it did was 1/1/2018. Or if I were to do date, I can see on 2/1 it has a 1,000 entry, and on 1/1 it will have the entry for the 1,500. It's basically because of some filters I've said it's not letting me see 1/1/18, but that's fine. But did not mean to go back into PowerPoint. Let's go back into Dynamics NAV and Budgets. So what I always say is that if you do intend to budget for specific days or specific weeks, and budget at that level, because once you've started budgeting at a higher level, when you zoom down, it may not show exactly where you need it to, and that can become the source for some confusion. So this is how we're basically taking some information and keying it in manually. And then if you want to, you can change this, remove this filter, and perhaps somebody from the sales department can start coming in and budgeting. They'll do the same thing, same account numbers, but when I reverse, or when I refresh, now I don't have any advertising budget, but somebody's already contributed some entertainment and PR budget and a few other things in here. If you want to copy from a previous period, and if you would like to simply be able to get or recreate your budget for a certain amount of time, you could say copy budget, and this will allow you to take information either from actuals or from a prior budget. So if I want to take it from a prior budget, I'd say take it from the 2017 budget. And then I would say if you want to take it from one account or a range of accounts, what date entries to consider. If there are closing entries that you have on the actuals, then you want to consider closing entries or not. It doesn't really apply as much with the budget. And then copy to which budget and to which account numbers or ranges. And if I want to adjust this, so if I'd like it to be exactly the same as last year, it would be 1. If I want to see a 20% increase, I'd say 1.2. And then how would I like to round this? What is my rounding method? Round down to the tens, the thousands, to a whole number, to hundreds, etc. I can do those. And if I also want to have a date compression at a certain level, I'd say day, week, month, year, etc., and how I want to register. So I can do this, and this allows me to grab data from a prior budget. So this is how simple it is for us to create, manage, and work with budgets within Dynamics NAV. And here, of course, we're looking at everything as GL accounts as lines, and my columns as my periods. So if I wanted to, I could actually turn this around on its head. This is more helpful when I've got a predefined date filter. So I could say I actually want to see by department, by period, and I can remove this. This could be a good way for me to visualize. So, and then I could say show me by quarter, perhaps. So Q1, 14, Q2, Q3, Q4, etc. And I can see all of that detail. So if you'd like to, you can view it a lot of different ways. Anyways, let's go ahead. We'll close this out. Oh, yeah, I'm going to go back and use the same budget, and I'll export, and I'll actually work with this in in Excel. So pardon the inconvenience for a second. All right, so now some sanity has prevailed. Let's remove our filters. We've got this at the month level again. All right, everything's looking better. Now, if I want to, before I work with this in Excel, if I want to do a quick comparison of balance versus budget for any period, you can see there's a nice little shortcut right here. And I can see debit amounts, credit amounts, what the budgeted debit, what the budgeted credit was, and the balance to budget percentage. So again, this might make more sense if I did this at the month level. And I can see the actual entries, and I might not have much going on at these asset account levels, but let's scroll down a little bit to some revenues. Now we see debit amounts and the budgeted debit amount So we budgeted revenue of our net income for, let me come down here a little bit. Yeah, this one's a good one. Purchase of raw materials. We anticipated $130,000, or so the actuals are $130,000, and we anticipated $128,000. Apparently that cough is getting to my mental sharpness because I'm reading the wrong columns. But as I come back now and decide I want to budget in Microsoft Excel, it's really just a few simple steps. So I can say take this entire budget or preset some filters. Maybe I'm giving this to my head of the administration department. So I only want him or her to budget for this particular filter. I might also only be interested in having them put in things into certain accounts. So I've got this as well. I'll say export to Excel. And I will say use 01/01/18. Periods will be maybe 12 periods. And period length is 1 month. And do not include totaling formulas. And these are the filters that I've set. I hit OK. And it creates this unique book for me in Microsoft Excel, which is going to open up in a second. Now, what happens is, depending on how you've got your Dynamics NAV configured, it might either use your Excel Online or it might use Excel installed. So I'm running this entire environment on Microsoft Azure, even though I've got it locally, even though I've got a local install client. But I just recall that I set my password, maybe for Alan M or Alicia T, actually, as, or it set this user up to use Excel in the cloud. So I'm going to go ahead and say, based on this, sign me in. It will then let me do this. Let me exit this and try to use this another user that doesn't need administrative access. So let's go ahead and come right back up. I'm actually down the home stretch, so in about the next 2 minutes or so, our presentation will be completed.
And again, I'll just jump in here. On the right-hand side, you're going to see the question area. If you've got a question that you'd like to ask AJ before we let him go, type that in and we'll make sure we get those addressed at the end.
Yep, thank you, Kim. So I'm back in the saddle. We're on budgets. I'm going to go ahead and just bring this up, edit this budget. We'll set the filters like we said before. I do want this to be at a month level. I'm going to set my filters 50,000 ... 69,999 and department admin. Yep. And we'll now use the export functionality. 01/01/18, 12, 1 month. I'd done my practice on the cloud and remote desktop area, so I should have actually tested this. I'm going to figure out what's going on, and I'll actually send you a sample exported to Excel worksheet as a handout for this in about a day. And you'll see basically it creates an Excel file that's going to have multiple tabs. You're going to be able to fill in. These filters will be predefined and clearly outlined so that the person entering in the data will know ahead of time that your entries are going to go only to these accounts with these filters preset, and they would then be able to come back in and you can import from Excel. Now when you're importing from Excel, you take the same file back in and you can say which budget it needs to go to. You would also say what's going to happen when there are more than one, if there's already an entry in a particular combination of period versus GL account within a certain filter. So do you want to replace entries or do you want to add entries? I always suggest adding entries is the way to go. And then you would also want to go ahead and note in the description that this was imported from Excel. And this helps us come up with the accurate source. Just like over here, if I'm creating an entry for a job cost, so if I'm budgeting for this particular account $100, and I look back in here, it will auto-populate everything except for a description, so then I need to tell the system what a description is. What it does then with the Excel ones, it will automatically populate the line that says imported from this particular Excel worksheet. So that allows us to do it. My apologies that we couldn't get the Excel part working, but beyond that, I'm now going to open up the floor for questions, and we can take those.
Awesome.
So I have one question here. Oh, okay. I'm just jumping right in with the questions.
All right, again, on the right-hand side, just type in what questions you'd like to ask. We got the first one here from Gary, and it says, once a cash flow forecast is created, is there a way to adjust the forecast to take into account actual cash flow activity?
So without building a separate cash flow forecast, I assume what we're basically saying is, can we... No. That's not a sign of nervousness, by the way. It's just the cough. But so once you've built a cash flow forecast, no, it does not automatically refresh as entries are being created, because remember that we are posting those entries from the suggest menu, and that's basically collecting everything, all the entries. So the only way to get those details are to either manually enter it, or it takes less than a minute. You can almost make that a top of the day thing that you do. Come into NAV, rerun that suggest cash flow forecast routine, same functions, same filters, and you post it, and at that point it will have collected any new actual entries that have existed, that have been entered since. So you can make it a periodic activity that you perform. Unfortunately, at this point in time, it does not automatically take those entries, because everything on my charts is coming from my cash flow chart of account entries, and those are only updated by registering entries from the cash flow forecast screen. And so if you don't enter this either by running the cash flow, let me go right back here. So while on the screen, if you don't go down this path of either saying cash flow worksheet and then using the suggest function, or entering by hand, it will not necessarily register those to the cash flow entry screen. So yeah, that's the short answer.
Okay, excellent.
More questions?
There are no questions in the queue. Any last words of advice before we let folks go?
Well, I think I would say that if you haven't yet registered for that NAV 2017 What's New session that's part of our virtual summit, certainly do. Again, I know I'm going back and plugging that event once more. There really is a lot of value to that event. But in that What's New in NAV 2017, you will see Tom talk about the advancements to cash flow forecasting. You'll see him talk about how, in addition to everything that we've got today up here, you're going to see Cortana Intelligence Suite further dictate what could be, or further kind of predict using some really nice machine learning tools, your cash position out into the future. Not only that, if you deal with inventory and sales, you can also use a Cortana Intelligence Suite to be able to predict some of those things out. Your sales forecasts, your inventory planning levels, some of those can also be predictively managed within Dynamics NAV. So a lot of nice stuff coming down the pipeline. That particular event, again, is on October the 25th. And I will send a quick email after this, maybe in the next hour or so, with a link for you to register for that event if you don't already have it.
Excellent. Thank you so much, AJ. I feel bad for you with your allergies, doggone it.
I know it's just been a long day, but I'm glad we got through it and we covered all the things. So thank you for everybody who sat through all of it. I don't think we've lost too many attendees to my cough.
Yeah, thanks so much. Again, as always, you're a great all-star. Oops, but guess what? We got a popped-in question here. Let's see. It says, can you predict or make a rule that all AR over 90 plus days would not be converted into cash, for example?
Ooh, I think what would happen is this. Let me go back into Dynamics NAV and let me go back into my screen here. So if I were to go to my cash flow forecast, by default, I have it consider, actually, come on, open up the screen first. So I have it consider GL budget from and manual payments, but I don't have an area to only consider general ledger entries from certain periods. But what I imagine we could do is when we've subsequently delved down into the cash flow worksheet and we suggest the lines, let's capture everything first. So I'm going to bring this back up here. We'll bring everything that we need, and then we could probably filter out the things that we don't need. So if I'm understanding Elena's question correctly, if I didn't want to consider anything from a certain period, 90 days ago, or etc., I could decide not to consider these entries like 12/17/17 if I don't want to consider this, and a handful of others. I could just come here and manually delete these lines. Now once I remove these, they won't be considered within my cash flow forecast. So if that was the intent of the question, I can see how we do it here. Unfortunately, there isn't a filter at runtime. I could also add the filter pane here and quickly filter out things that I don't want to consider. So I could say, show me things that are older than 01/01/18, and if there are any things here, then I could say, or yeah, these ones I could, for example, take out, or maybe I should have said more appropriately to 12/31/17. These are my old entries, and then I could take out and exclude these ones.
Excellent. Excellent. All right. There you go. All right. Any last words before we let folks go?
No, thank you very much for joining. I know a couple of you have been on both the webinar this morning, the NAV product tour, and this one. Thank you, brave souls, and I hope I've made valuable use of your time. We look forward to seeing you at another InterDyn BMI event, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thanks, AJ, as always.